Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session today. We have three panelists, which will do some introductions very shortly. For those of you who I have not had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Manny Tejeda, I'm the program director at CFD Global Pathways. In today's session, we're going to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and on campus. So I'm going to ask each of the presenters to tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the content, right? What is it to be in the DEI space as it relates to being on a college campus or on a workplace, and then we'll just have a nice conversation. And hopefully, this is not going to be a conversation of just us sharing with you, but really conversing with one another about what does it mean. Obviously, we can spend days, but this conference is only 24 hours. And we have other sessions that we have to attend. So we'll try to keep it as short into the time. And we do appreciate you waiting as we were with some hiccups in technology. So Porter, I think I'm gonna, since you're not joining us live, I'm gonna have you unmute yourself and give a brief intro, and then we'll follow it up with Chan.
Sounds good. I appreciate you all having me. And sorry if it's a bit loud. I'm actually at an airport traveling to Europe tonight, so in between travels at the moment. But my name is Porter Braswell, and I'm the executive chairman and co-founder of Jopwell. Jopwell has built the largest online community of Black, Latinx, and Native American students and professionals in America. And we work with over about 500 companies and support them in their diversity recruiting initiatives and efforts. I've been running that company for about 8 years, based in New York City. We've raised about 25 million in funding, and it's been an incredible journey. And so really excited to be a part of this.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shannon Garfield, and I'm excited to be here today. I am also a new board member of CFD Global Pathways, so I'm excited to be attending my first conference with you all. But I have a law history. My husband and I were mentored by Rick Dalton. We right out of law school. I am actually an attorney, but I feel like my life is similar to many of the students that you represent, that I am from a small little town in North Carolina called Pembroke, which has a population of less than 3,000 people. And I am actually a first generation student. Not one of my parents went to college, but they, like most parents and people in the US, have a dream that they want their children to have a life that was better than them. So I'm the youngest of 8, and but for diversity and inclusion and people like Rick Dalton, I don't think that I'm the person that I am, and that's why I truly try to use my life to give back and have dialogue. I come here also as a community advocate because I feel like outside of my title and role, that we each have an obligation to assist others here in the country. I think this is a beautiful country, and that we all originally are from other places, except for the indigenous people. And to that extent, we really need to help each other to grow and move forward. So I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Donald Outing. I'm also a board member with CFES. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Equity Community at Lehigh University. Lehigh University is a small to mid-sized private university in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Prior to serving as Vice President of Equity Community, I was a professor of mathematics and the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, where I served at West Point for 20 years, served in the military for 34 years, retired in 2014. One of the things I did while I was professor of mathematics there and leading diversity at West Point was I was the founding director for the Center on Leadership and Diversity in STEM. And it was about getting more students, especially middle school age students involved in math, science, technology, engineering. And part of what we did was we partnered with CFES back then. This was, oh man, 2010, 2012, somewhere around there, partnered with CFES to introduce more students to not just STEM, but the opportunities of attending service academies. And then later to expose students to opportunities to attending elite institutions, top tier, top 50, top 100 institutions like Lehigh University. And so that's where our partnership continues to grow, is in support of building pathways to higher education. And I'm happy to be here and look forward to the conversation.
That's great. Well, welcome and thank you for those introductions. So I think to get us started and just to create that baseline, can you each kind of define what does diversity, equity, and inclusion really mean? And I want you to use the lens, obviously, of your, the context that you're in. So whether it be higher education, or community, whether it be on the corporate side, what does that really mean? That obviously we hear it a lot, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion. But not many people really have the opportunity to ask that secondary question. What does it really mean? And anybody can go. Porter?
Porter, if you wanted to start, all right, I'm happy to start if you wanted, if you don't want to.
Yeah, I will jump in. So obviously diversity is a large umbrella term. And I actually find that in the corporate lens, people typically use the word, we have a diversity challenge because it would be awkward to be very specific about what you actually mean. So it's easier to use the word diversity. Now, within the umbrella of diversity, obviously there are many different verticals, whether it's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, military status, gender, a variety of different definitions. And what I have found is that the organizations that can be explicitly clear about what they mean by diverse do better when it comes to moving the needle and actually finding solutions. And so it's like any good product that if you can be explicitly clear about the pain point you're trying to solve, then you can apply very direct solutions for that given problem. And so in my lens, thinking about diversity within the lens of corporate America, I work within the population of Black, Latinx, and Native American students and professionals. And so at Jopwell, that's the community that we've built, and we were intentional about naming that community so that we can find solutions that particularly resonate with those communities. And even in that subset, it's very hard to have singular solutions, as obviously there's a lot of nuance and different challenges for different communities. But the more specific companies can get when they talk about diversity, where they have diversity challenges, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to overcome some of those obstacles. So that's how I think about diversity. I think about it through the lens of being an umbrella, but very different verticals underneath it, and then focusing on specific verticals to find appropriate solutions.
Interesting. Diversity is us. And I think the fact that each of you individuals came to this panel today speaks to that, because we all are different in various ways, and to accept all of our difference. Some of our differences are traits that are immutable, things that we cannot change. For instance, we're all different hues of various skin tones in our room. We're all different gender. These each have been our definitional. There are things that we may have that we may not be able to see. So to me, diversity is bringing yourself and your true self into the room. And I agree with Porter that one, first place is to decide that it matters. And by being here today, you have done that. And then the next step is, as most corporations and companies and community organizations, not limited to corporations, it's also school systems, whatever environment you're in, not only deciding that it matters, but in noting those differences, but coming together, and at least now in our country, creating a statement, some goals, some intentions around that we want to basically accept each other as we are. So we live diversity all of our lives. Our country lived diversity since B1619, when the first enslaved people arrived here. And so, I mean, then later, when the Mayflower arrived, there were families on the Mayflower, men and women and children. So we've had diversity in our country for over 400 years. And that's why diversity matters in the United States.
Those were great explanations, and I guess I'll share with you my definitions of diversity, inclusion, and equity, in the lens of a diversity practitioner, as doing this work on behalf of the military as well as higher ed for 20 years. My definitions I keep very short, very simple, and very terse. And so for Justice Thomas out there who's still wondering what diversity is, I define diversity, or many of us define diversity simply as all of the attributes, background, and experiences that bring value to the organization. Plain and simple as that. It's both the inherited as well as the acquired diversity that we've accumulated over time that we bring that's value added to the organization. When we talk about inclusion, we talk about those practices that the organization, community, that the society commits to, so that everyone feels that their value added to that organization, to that society, to that company, business, higher educational organization as well. And then finally, equity. Equity is just simply ensuring people have what they need to succeed. It's just as simple as that. All of these things, as you can imagine, are important, not just for the individual, but for the health of the organization as well. Because if we're not drawing from the diverse experiences, attributes, and backgrounds of our employees, of our constituents, if we're not creating an environment where they feel like they're value added, and if we're not providing resources so everyone feels that they have what they need to succeed, then the individual fails, the organization fails as well. So these are important for all of us.
So that creates an outstanding baseline for really what we're gonna be discussing today, right? So we talk about the importance. We don't spend a lot of time talking about the importance, because we know that what would happen if we don't value those things, right? But when we think about, let's say, organizations that perhaps are not, it's not at the core, it's not defined, doesn't show as important. What can organizations do to really bring that to the forefront of what they're doing, so that they can become more inclusive, but also, on the equity side, we hear a lot on corporate boards, you're not seeing the diversity that mirrors the national demographic of who we are, or the makeup of the United States. When you look at college enrollment, you don't see the representation the same way it is as the United States. So maybe can you talk a little bit about, what we could be doing, or perhaps what you're doing as individuals, as part of organizations and at companies to create this space in initiatives that have worked.
We're looking at the screen for you,
Yes,
Porter.
order. It's rotation here.
Okay, okay,
You're not in the room, I think it's easier to allow you to go
Okay.
first.
okay, absolutely. Actually, here's a question for y'all. Can you see me or can you only hear me?
We can only hear you.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Well, let's see, Manny, that's a big question. And I could spend an hour talking about it, but I'll keep it short here. It has to be baked into everything that the organization does. It can't be a standalone thing. It can't be pushed off to one person. It has to be a part of the culture. So how do you do that? Well, it starts with employer branding. What imagery are you using to express your values publicly? What types of words are you using in your job description to signal that you're trying to be inclusionary? When people are interviewing at your company, what are the questions that you're asking them? Who are the people that are actually interviewing them? What are you being graded on? How transparent is that? When you accept the offer and you get onboarded, what does that look like? And this can't just be for folks of color or people who identify as being diverse. This is, again, everybody needs to be a part of this. It has to be baked into the system. When you talk about quarterly reviews, are people prepared for what those reviews look like? Do people understand what they're going to be graded on? How does feedback get communicated? Are promotions something that's transparent? And the promotion cycle, pay equity, how are organizations thinking about that? Are there equitable programs that are placed within these companies? Now, equitable programs are different than equal programs, right? So if you have certain employees that are not being retained at a certain clip compared to everybody else, well, then an equitable program would be to give them more support, more resources. Maybe it's a mentorship program. So there has to be this holistic perspective that you take in order to ensure that diversity is horizontally integrated within a company and not on a vertical level. It has to touch every single thing you do. And then how are you communicating your values to the people that buy your products, your stakeholders? How is diversity being infused into that messaging? So it's not just one thing. It has to be included in every single thing that you do. Therefore, it's every single person's job, every department's job. And it really starts up top with the CEO and making sure that it's explicitly clear that this is not one person's task. And if we're going to succeed in this, it's everybody.
Okay, well, I'm a higher ed practitioner. And as the vice president of the community, my perspective on this is going to come from how I think about this from that perspective. So just like what Porter said, it has to be baked in everything you do. So it has to be tied to our mission. It has to be tied to our mission of educating. What does that mean to educate? And what is higher education's role and the importance of higher education's role in preparing this next generation of leaders that are going to go out there and serve and lead organizations. They're going to lead major corporations. They're going to represent us in Washington, D.C. Well, it's higher education that is the wellspring for that leadership. I'm going to steal some words from Colin Powell. When in 1998, I had the pleasure of meeting when he came to West Point to receive the Thayer Award for outstanding civilian service. And he talked about West Point being the wellspring of our military profession. And so when I think about colleges and universities, I think about them, they're the wellspring of leadership for many of our chosen professions. That's the place where professional standards are set, the place that defines our American culture, the place that nurtures our values and virtues and passes them along from generation to generation. It's really what higher education is about. It's not just about preparing our leaders, it's also about imparting those virtues and values that are going to get passed from generation to generation on what it is to be truly American, if you will. So what do? It's for us, the value proposition of a residential educational experience. It's not just what takes place in the classroom, what takes place on the college campus period. The interaction with a diverse group of people, the different backgrounds, like I said, the different backgrounds and experiences that people are bringing to the campus. It is through that interaction that you're developing and growing as well. We're bringing people from the heartland, bringing people from the Bay Area, we're bringing people from Northeast, we're bringing people from urban and rural areas together to learn and be educated. So it's important that they be educated in this very diverse, multicultural environment. So that's how we think about diversity, and the work that we do is about bringing in, setting a diverse class. Inclusion and equity, how do we think about that? Well, we're also bringing people from different socioeconomic status. We're bringing people that are Pell eligible, meaning that they're coming from the lowest income bracket of earned income in the United States. And we're bringing them to some of the top institutions. So we have to provide for them. It's not enough that we just provide for the cost of attending, but we also have to make sure that we're providing so that they are having the same experience that the other students are at. So if the typical Lehigh student studies abroad, then our typical, all students should study abroad. Be able to do a summer internship, be able to do summer research. So we talk about equity and inclusive practices. We go all the way in thinking about this. We don't just think about them while we're trying to set the class, but we're also thinking about them during their time there, and then our connectivity to them and our association with them as alumni as well. So that's how we're thinking about higher education. Forgive me if I don't know too much.
Oh, no. That's excellent. I'm gonna clap right now. Because when you mentioned Pell Grant, I was that student. I was that student who attended university when the first of my family received those Pell Grants. So to the question though, of what specific things can we do? Now that once I was armed with the tools and became an attorney, I began to work with organizations in the community. I was on the advisory neighborhood commission in Washington, D.C., which is one commission under the mayor that works with residents and communities. And I put that out there to tell you that not all their schools, universities, higher education, or community are dealing with this issue. And so that organization actually worked. I worked with the community because at that point, and this was literally only a year ago, the community said, what can we do? You know, there's a lot of talk about diversity, there are things that are going on in the country, and we feel like we need to understand by not only African Americans, but other people in the United States. And so the first thing we started was one, decided that it matters. That's what we've done today by being here, decided it matters. The next piece was that we took steps. So we formed a working group and a committee to come up with a diversity statement. Not only did the community organization do this, but we worked with schools as well, because there were schools who were saying, we have a diverse student body, whether it's race, culture, gender, socioeconomic status, and the line goes on. You know, how can we assist those students and embrace those students? So initially working groups were formed, they formed a working group. Then next they brought in experts, individuals themselves. They did do reading and articles, attended conferences and panels. But another step is to educate yourself, and you can do that by there are numerous organizations here, or I won't say numerous is a relative term, but there are organizations that are out there who can assist you, your schools or whatever organization or corporation work with. To talk about issues of diversity. That is the next first step. Next, once we did that, we talked about what were our priorities. In order to do that, we did have to gather the data. So I know CSES for your pathways is great about gathering data, like I'm sure Lehigh is, and Porter as well, gathering the data and finding out, you know, what does our community look like? Who are the people that are here with us? And then once we did that, then the next step is to actually work collaboratively to implement these things. And it can be overwhelming at times, so you can get in small steps. That's actually what we did. So I put that out here to show you an example. You know, the type of diversity can seem overwhelming because there are so many facets of it. But you, as an individual, or with others within community or school, it is something that's doable in terms of working on the issue, something the issues, and continuing to make it a priority.
Thank you. And I think that's a great segue into my next point, related to, obviously, that's what you can do at the community level, at the higher ed level, at the corporate level. And I think sometimes we think about, maybe we're in places where perhaps that space is not there, right? So how do we, as individuals, kind of push to create those spaces? And sometimes it might seem overwhelming to do it yourself, but the reality is that you have supporters that can help out, right? So I'm curious, if you have any experience ever being in a place or a place, we'll leave it at that, where you've had to kind of take that ground or build that momentum to really bring to the leaders who perhaps might not have this lens to really move things forward for the better. And more importantly, on the business side, how do you've got leaders who are concerned about the bottom line. How does this energy and resources take away from the bottom line, whether it be enrollment, whether it be, increasing profits for shareholders or creating a better community? So I know that was a long one, so we will touch, you don't have to go in depth, just briefly cover some of those things. And you don't have to cover all three, you could just cover whatever you want. Porter, we're looking at you.
Awesome. Well, I would just say that you have to meet people where they are, and you have to understand the context of the person you're trying to influence. So this all happens in like a human to human way, right? So if you're talking to specific people, understand again how they're stepping into the conversation and what matters to them, and then just tie the conversation of diversity, the big umbrella word, to them so that it resonates with them. It comes down to the type of company and the type of work that you're doing, but there's a cohesive and clear argument to be made about why diversity matters. And honestly, if we're finding ourselves in a dialogue where you're trying to get somebody to understand why diversity matters, personally, I don't have the capacity anymore to try to explain that to somebody. I think we should be at a place where we all understand the value of it. So there are some arguments that you're just not going to win. And that doesn't mean that you give up. It means that you devote your energy to other people who get it. But I think generally speaking, just make sure you understand the context that the person's coming into the conversation with, meet them where they are, and show empathy, have patience, have kindness, and be willing to be vulnerable with that individual. And I think typically people are good and they want to do the right things, and this falls into that camp.
Yeah, so I guess that's what I do in higher education. As a diversity practitioner in higher education, is pretty much what you do. You're constantly putting forward the argument case why diversity matters, and how do you push this, and how do you keep the momentum going. First, I'm going to tell you, if you are so inclined to do this and doing it, you will already know that this is exhausting work. It's exhausting. It's for the reason that Porter touched on. It's exhausting having to tell the same story and tell it in different ways, and showing the data and presenting the data in multiple ways. So sometimes you have to make a social and moral case for why diversity is important. But that's only gets you so far. And really what organizations really focus on and want to focus on is what's called the business case. The business case for diversity, and unfortunately, that's where I spend too much of my time trying to talk to organizations, not just Lehigh, but I also belong to the National Association of Diversity Officers in Higher Education, which is the preeminent voice for diversity practitioners in higher education. I also talk to nonprofit organizations as part of the consulting work that I do, and how to continue to push and why this is important. I have to talk to local, state, and federal legislatures as well. And so when making that case in higher education, it comes down to, I was fortunate enough that I think over around 2017, 16 or 17, Nathan Broad came out with a book called Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education. And he put it all there, right there in writing. And also the Ritchie report that came out not too long after that also stated the case why diversity is important. Biggest reason is because you can no longer rely on the wellspring of college-bound students that are white and coming out of the northeast area. You're going to have to begin relationships in recruiting from the West and Southwest. You're gonna have to start recruiting students that are gonna be brown, more students that are gonna be brown and black. You're gonna have to start focusing on more students that are attending, that are gonna be the first in their family to attend college. Gonna have to begin to start providing assets for students that are in that lower income bracket to be able to attend these institutions and ensure that they graduate and have a positive experience. If we don't do that, higher education isn't going to have a client to draw from. We're all going to be trying to pull from the same place. When I first got to Lehigh in 2017, 70% of our students came from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, and a few from New England. 70% of our student body. That model isn't going to exist now, since we've changed. We have Posse, we partnered with Posse Bay Area, for example. So we're now bringing more students in a Posse cohort to Lehigh from California. We're bringing more students from Texas than we've ever brought before. Unfortunately, this is what resonates with folks that I have to talk to, is that it's this unsustainable model if we continue to draw from the same talent that we've been drawing from to this point. Stop talking. Sorry.
Diversity matters because the United States does not operate in a vacuum. Think about that. We are now an international political partner. We are, like a better word here, competing with numerous countries, places across the world, with various skill sets and various individuals. And that is also the case, and that goes to your point about the business case for diversity. United States, as you can see from the situations that we've been going through recently, just with inflation, just companies, anything you can think of, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, workforce, it impacts all facets of our lives. And the fact that here, I mean, I always back to the point of how do we make the case? We shouldn't. The case is intertwined with goals, whether it's a community, whether it's a school, because every day that I think each of you walk in that, you represent. There's something about you as an individual within the community that you walk in. Absolutely make a case for diversity. Diversity is more than just race. There are other, as we started with, there are other both mutable and mutable traits that we all carry with us. And to the extent that our companies, our schools, our communities take this into account, make us a better place as far as the work we're doing, but also allows our country to keep in the global marketplace.
I want to open it up for the audience. There are other questions that we're going to get to, but given what we've discussed so far, what are questions or things you want to share and have a panel answer? Go ahead, sir.
I would like to get your opinion with the pending Supreme Court ruling.
Sir, are you reading my notes? Got it.
Great thing. What do you think? What kind of impact will it have on diversity, especially in those universities and it's coming probably next spring.
Porter, could you hear that question?
I can hear it, but I'm probably not the best person to comment on that.
I mean, this has just been top of mind since Roe v. Wade was overturned. We've been bracing for this. But actually, that's not true. We've been bracing for this since Rutgers, Michigan, Fisher, Texas, and now Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and North Carolina. We're back here again. Yeah, it wasn't me. With each of those rulings, leading up to those rulings, and some states, also like Texas, saying that race cannot be considered a factor. We've seen, so we've got data that shows that the impact will be quick and will be harsh, and that there will be a diminished number of students of color that will be attending our more elite institutions. Without these protections in place, we've seen it happen. We saw it happen in Michigan. We saw it happen in Texas. And if the Supreme Court decides to throw out affirmative action, it will throw out one of the most important tools that we are able to use, because what you're talking about is this isn't just a university decision to try to recruit more or less students. What you're talking about is resources that are available because affirmative action will be cut. All those resources go away. Everything that we use that we're relying on to try to bring in diverse classes. Just about every college president, every military leader has argued that this is an imperative. Yet our courts continue to revisit this argument every time. Practitioners and leaders in the field have been communicating that it will have an extreme adverse impact, especially on the Black or African American community. That will be the community that will see the greatest impact. The research bears out and it's shown it time after time. It is interesting, though, that the organization that is arguing the case for SFFA is using a group, and I said using a group, using the Asian American community as a way to overturn legislation that benefited that group. It's very interesting that that's happening at this time. So, to answer your question, it's going to be a serious adverse effect. I don't see it coming out any other way. Now, what will happen for us, we'll have to do like we've had to do before, get very creative in how we build classes, diverse classes. And that's going to come down to relationship building. We've always relied on community-based organizations, not-for-profit organizations like CFES, Posse Foundation, those organizations that do that work, building those relationships and using those organizations, but their resources are going to be impacted by this as well.
I love that we're having this dialogue today. I'm sure many of you may be confused or not know about the kids or know what's happening. Maybe you do. I'm sure you're educators and you do know. But to back up, and I guess the attorney is saying that, first of all, let's start from let's establish principle here. For over 40 years, our court had the precedent of saying that higher education is high race as one among many factors in your college education. Harvard University has been doing this. Also, the additional case of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, as well. So this has been established precedent in the law. And to back up, the case went to Supreme Court because SFFA challenged the appeal because two lower courts, first one after having a jury trial, found it for Harvard University. And so it is true, there is speculation right now, and I'm sure as university officials, you have to prepare and how likelihood, and many people are speculating on perhaps the way to go. But as we were talking before the panel, looking at this procedurally, it's interesting that it's not just the Harvard case, it's the University of North Carolina. And initially, the two cases were together as one case. The Supreme Court, because of Justice Ketanji Brown, her patient with Harvard, and basically wanting her to be able to participate in the civil arguments, separated the two cases. So Harvard University made their argument, and then the University of North Carolina made their argument. But actually, in the procedure, you went first. So these are two different schools with two different admission systems, two different historical perspectives in terms of what diversity means. My speculation as an attorney, and there are people who disagree with me, is that perhaps the court may split the decision, looking at Harvard as an institution, different set of facts, in one way, and perhaps looking at the University of North Carolina another way, which to me could potentially make the case for universities and schools to basically, for instance, as you mentioned, California and Michigan, two different states, two different sets of demographics, two different types of universities, and to make the case that different universities may be able to make the case that their admissions suits their individual institutions and their individual states. So I'm only speculating. We won't know until June, but I do hope, and that's a glimmer, maybe there's the door, a slight opening, that it may not be as extreme as it is presented. But I know as an institution, you have to prepare for that because you have a constant need, going back to our case for diversity, to bring in these students. So to the extent that people can, institutions can begin to prepare, which I'm sure you are, we don't necessarily know the answer. We have hints, yes, because the oral argument, which went on for over 5 hours, I'm the nerd, the geek in the room, and who listened to part of those. Extremely long, and you got hints of the newer justices, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Each justice came to it with a different perspective on it. And so just perhaps looking at the history, we can try to speculate, but at the end of the day, we don't know. All we can do is prepare to the best extent that we can. And I think that you bring an excellent point. You're gathering up your data and your resources, and you are looking at your particular demographic and what you do. So I think that, there is still a little bit of hope. I hope it is. And just to take it back to an individual piece, it's interesting when you break down data of why it matters. I'm an attorney, I'm a Black attorney. The US population is like 342 million. The African American population of that is about 31 million. Of lawyers, there are 1 million lawyers in the US. I am one of only 55,000 Black attorneys. So when you break down the data, the case for diversity, here I am, a young woman, a town less than 2,000 people from rural North Carolina. I should not be here today. I should not have graduated from high school. I should not have attended college. I shouldn't have gone to law school. But now I am today able to use the skills to get into law school, and statistics said that I shouldn't have been there. But because institutions similar to Lehigh took what some may have said a leap on a person, because my African American experience in being who I am and being from rural America, who I am, they took that leap, and now I am able to look at these cases and actually to represent people. At the beginning of my career, I worked on class action lawsuits to represent both rural and people of color to get access to health care. So I am one individual case. And I'm sure you have a story sitting in your own seat of either yourself or people you know or your family about why the case was reversed. So my hope is even if they did go the way of eliminating race as a factor, that individuals like you, institutions that you work with, will continue to find a way to bring individuals who may look like me into the workplace, into your school, to Great school. I graduated from Milwaukee in 2010 and then I went to university in 2015. Currently I'm a data analyst and advertising. But I did want to add a comment color to that conversation. First, when I did go to university, it did include basically a kind of affirmative action style type of program where bringing in underrepresented communities into the school. You did still have to be pretty I guess you would say like a straight A student, but to speak about this action piece that contribute to what's being put out there is that actually there are a lot of Black students that have a credential. So the scores, the community service, the extracurricular activities, the internships, they do have all that, and then they actually aren't selected. Which was interesting to me as a data analyst, because sometimes when you look at the data, you actually do wanted to say, just about how you frame it. So again, it was very interesting to see that actually you guys are like telling on yourselves now, because the data is showing you that instead of this affirmative action kind of thing being something that like is unfair to other groups of students, actually unfair to the student that is supposed to help. And then, but there was an argument that particularly that's because schools that a lot of African American students go to were not as prestigious as the high schools that others have come from. But then again, that's all relative as well, because it says that that same Black student can go to that prestigious high school and do well there. Or vice versa, that student that was at this prestigious high school, how do you think they can do well at the school where I guess a lot of African American students go to and is not as prestigious as. But yeah, I just wanted to add that comment because it's just so interesting. And when you start to look into the data, I didn't see the 5-hour long kind of link or whatever. I hope to get that.
Yeah.
I do want to look at that. But I just thought it was just so interesting when you look at the numbers, you're trying to say one thing about the situation, and then it comes out that we actually we're to go. Like we're actually.
So Chief, if I can comment on that, is that you're absolutely right about some of the data that you're reporting. Problem is this, is that affirmative action was originally established to address some historical racial injustice that would come to Black communities. Once affirmative action was expanded to include matters of gender, a preference was shown by a lot of these institutions. They could meet their affirmative action objectives by bringing in, say, for example, white women instead of Black males. So what you saw immediately when they expanded the affirmative action guidelines, was an immediate shift among a lot of institutions with this preference. And so you saw, like you said, individuals that were Black, fully met the qualifications, not getting selected and being preferred over others that seemed more palatable to those organizations. And you saw this decline. So absolutely right in that, but there is a deeper reason why that occurred.
Thank you.
I have a question that may not be relevant. So the area I came from before I went to my current state, it was a very diverse community. I loved it because you could hear any language walking through the hallway. And it's just beautiful to me. But the community I am in now, more or less, is monochromatic. but I'm trying to get my students to open up to new cultures, new. Just getting them to open up to see the beauty of what people are. And as somebody who is very much like them, they don't see it, whereas I got to see, so I came from Dallas Fort Worth. And Dallas Fort Worth, very beautiful area. The high school that I was at had over 40 first languages spoken. And it was just gorgeous thing. I loved hearing, between Hindi and, Arabic and Mandarin. You had all these languages, you had all these different cultures that were infiltrated within that high school. We were an international school. But the school that I'm at now is just like trying to get them to experience, like I said, just the beauty of what other cultures have to offer. And how do you do that?
Thank you.
That's a great question, and you are a great educator for even thinking outside of the box. Not even outside the box, just thinking. Are you still in Texas?
No.
Okay, all right, another place. Well, I know that the work that I've done in the community, and I actually with schools, there have been times we've done school partnerships. And if your school, like as you use your language is monochromatic and has one set of students to partner with a more diverse school, whether it be activities or having a sister school officially, you can do that. I know where I live in the Washington D.C. area, there were a lot of either public-private school partnerships, even public schools with different patterns. Even beyond the schools, partnering with local community organizations. One example may be to work with a local soup kitchen or a local church or just any organization that may offer have for you. It is probably to take some research. You're figuring out what's in your area, what is there, but the fact that you set your intention as the first step, definitely going to reach you, and it is doable because it has been done. You can also partner perhaps maybe with other colleagues, because I'm sure that there are either individuals in the room or other schools or professionals who've done this type of programs. And so they do exist out there to the extent that we need to use the CFBS Growing Pathways resources, because there's just so many diverse schools and projects within CFBS. We can do that as well. I think that's where we start. And Rick Dalton is here. So I don't know if Rick had any comments or thoughts about partnering, because I think you've been on the forefront of that. Bringing different tools.
Really agree with what you said.
Okay.
We're here to help.
I'm gonna take it to the grassroots, local legislative level. Well, I went to Baltimore Polytechnic Institute, very diverse school. Today it's over 60% Black. Extremely very talented school, but it wasn't until I went to college that I ever took a course that included the Black experience in my history class. I had to go to college for that to happen. The fact that we're sitting here talking about how to expose our kids to other cultures by having to go outside the school is problematic in itself. Why aren't we including the stories, the narratives of all of our people, all of their cultures in the history that we teach? Why aren't first people talked about in a very positive light? Why are African Americans excluded where our origin story started at slavery? It's the story that we usually hear. It's problematic the way we have the system set up right now. So I have to get on my soapbox sometimes with that and ask that question, because it is something that has frustrated me as well, because, being father of 3 children, if we did not take the time to educate them about their culture, who they are and how they are a part of the American fabric, we talk about 1619, these type of things, they shouldn't have to wait to go to college to take a special course, nor should educators have.
And actually, speaking of 1619, that project, 1619 project, which was done by the New York Times, Enterprise, I think,
Nicole Hannah Jones.
yes, Nicole Hannah Jones, they actually have a program that will work with elementary, middle, and high school students called the 1619 project. You can go online, and it does talk about like first history and especially the African American experience. So that is one way to piggyback on that. You can, as an individual, since you have decided this is what you're attending, you can incorporate that within your curriculum and work with you too.
And on the school district.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's right.
We
Depending.
don't want to, we don't want to fire.
Northeast Washington, one of the most liberal, let's do everything. Areas, but to the have that.
A sad comment, last year. Unfortunately, the first time I heard of the 1619 project at the school board meeting. And then a great parent using us for teaching the 1619 project, and having critical race theory, et cetera. And so it's sad in the fact that it's a great curriculum. And to see, that was the first time I heard of it, that's kind of a sad point to me, but at the same time, just like you said, you have to be very, unfortunately, extremely cautious, especially up here in this neck of the woods. Because when there's just so many people out there right now that don't want, they don't even know what they're saying. They're willing to challenge your position and drag you through a lot on social media. And potentially threaten your job if you're teaching what they view as CRT, which it's just frankly, it sucks, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, so, in Florida, and there's access legislation against diversity in our classroom, especially for students from background and students from the youth. I feel like educators in the school that is important left out a student, their narratives are, or their narratives are sort of staying there. But that's, but I feel like it is that try our best, like, it's scary. Scary.
You gotta vote.
Right.
That is true. You all raise very good points that not all is accepted, and I, so to the extent that we were here and then continue to have ideas, it's true, you will have to work against, perhaps certain issues in your area, but I would just say, don't give up, because an example, perfect example, be taking it back full circle to the Supreme Court case. The the Student Fair Edition, I always get tongue tied with that, actually is suing under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 19. And so, at that time, of your history, there were people who were not able to, there was segregation, there were Jim Crow laws. So, to the extent that there are always people who are, lack of a better word, running against the current, don't be afraid, because there are other people. The fact that the Civil Rights Act of 1904 came into under President Lyndon Johnson, there were forces within our country who did fight for other individual rights, does not mean that because of what I call this blip in our history, that we should give up on continuing to embrace our diversity. We have been a country that's diverse for over 400 years, and we cannot let 4 years, 5 years, whatever, take away the beauty of our country, because we are a beautiful country. I've traveled to so many places outside of the US, when I think about it, the diversity of our people and to see the diversity of our cultures and what we all bring to the room, I think that makes us truly unique. And the history, the spectrum of history, we may have a shorter timeline in other countries, but the fact that we are an amalgam of so many different people makes us stronger. And I think until people begin to realize that, that is a sad state, but do not give up on that because we have a long history of, yes, there are negative things in our history that we need to know about, learn about, and our country honestly needs to embrace for us to move forward. But know that there are people, there are laws out that are on the positive part that can protect you. So I would give you hope in that. I know it's scary, but please know that you're not alone.
Right, well, in the interest of time, one last question or comment?
Very quickly. Dr. Watley, CFPS, the exchange program, where a group of students, so Watley is a part of in New York City, in what we would call the inner city, urban area, right? And we connected with Roseboro students, and traveled up to Roseboro, and we spent the day with them. So we went to their classes, we went to the grounds of their gym and their campus. It was so amazing, and like I'm still friends with them on Facebook to this day. They also came to our school and did a day with us, and that was probably like one of the best experiences I could remember with CMPS. So thank you for just wanted to make sure you knew that you guys are already doing it and it works.
All right, well, that is a great segue to end this presentation or panel. Porter, thank you so much and safe travels to Europe. And you want to add up one?
This last thing, I know we're breaking, but Manny has been so phenomenal in coordinating our panelists and our different schedules. And speaking of like the history of the US, I'm very much a history buff. There's a photographer, Gordon Parks, African-American photographer, who did an amazing work chronicling the civil rights struggles in the US and the segregation story. So in light of that, I wanted to, on behalf of our panel, present them with this coffee table book that literally has original photography from that era. Because as they say, can't forget the past. Thank you so much.